And look, I'm an ex-regulator, is we need clarities. We need to know the rules of the road. In this case, like the FDIC and other regulators, the Fed, and they say, hey, we want those deposits to be under 15% of your business. They snap their fingers. And look, any bank or financial institution that has a deposit base, if they have to get rid of the bulk of their deposits overnight, those deposits are matched against investments on the other side. That's going to destroy their balance sheet, their liquidity position. And really, that's the point to other banks, is if you displease us, we will do something that will cause a run on your bank. It'll send your stock price to zero. So let's use bank grade controls, but have APIs that let third parties access those funds with consent of the consumer. Combine that principle with fair access, which means, look, if it's legal and it's licensed, it should be banked. There shouldn't be a shadow shaming list of what industries can't get access to banking services.
So it was almost 4 years ago when you texted me the night before Christmas Eve. You wanted to record our first ever podcast, and it was because Jay Clayton, who was then SEC chief, on his last day on the job, had just dropped this huge lawsuit against Ripple, claiming that XRP was a security. As it turns out, that first video is still our most viewed video of all time. Clearly this is a topic that people care about. But that lawsuit would really set the tone for the Gary Gensler era at the SEC. And his administration could be defined by, let's say, a lack of clarity and regulation by enforcement. Since then, beyond Ripple, he's gone after Coinbase, he's gone after Uniswap, Kraken, basically all of the top crypto firms in the industry. The other week, Gensler, you could say, got grilled by the House Financial Services Committee. How do you think that went?
Well, Gary took a drubbing. He had other commissioners there as well, and even they were undermining him. As clear contrast between what Gary's doing and what the mission is of the SEC, which is to protect investors, provide clarity, encourage capital formation. And so it was unclear to anybody that Gary is on a mission, and he is untethered to the mission of the SEC, and that there is a lack of clarity which enables him to basically put anyone at risk at any time. And big question will be what will happen to Gary post November 5th, regardless of whether there's a Trump victory or a Harris victory. Will he be allowed to continue to basically be on his own, you can call it personal mission that is basically untethered from the actual mission of the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great moment in one of the clips that you shared with me. Patrick McHenry, the committee chair, asks Gensler a very straightforward question, and Gensler he waffles.
So the labels matter less than what the economics are.
But there are different terms, and words have meaning.
Well, the laws are clear, and it's written by the Supreme Court, but also...
The laws are clear, but what we're seeing from the SEC is a lack of clarity. That's what I'm trying to ask you about. You have the direct question is about the different terms, and rather than answering that question, you answered a separate question. Kudos to you. Commissioner Peirce, let's get into this question.
McHenry then directs that same question to his fellow commissioner sitting next to him, Hester Peirce, and she gives this just fantastically scathing answer. She says,
I think that's absolutely true. We've taken a legally imprecise view to mask the regulatory lack of clarity.
That's right. And that lack of clarity just enables Gary to wield a special kind of power, which is just untethered from the law and from any rules or regulations. And just basically, if you're on the wrong side of Gary, you're going to be in court. I mean, I think the example there was Gary was actually asked to explain why Yankees tickets weren't a security when other NFT-based tickets that gave you access to games or virtual realities were considered to be a security. And Gary as usual, waffled, would not give a straight answer. And if there's one thing that I believe we need, and look, I'm an ex-regulator, is we need clarities. We need to know the rules of the road so we know what is a security, what is not a security, and why is that so. And we are in a situation now where there's literally thousands of these instruments out there. Nobody knows what is what. And even if it is a security, nobody knows how to register it. There's not a clear process. Nobody's ever gone through. And so it's just a catch-22 situation. It's costing our country its competitive position in this space. And it's really a travesty. It makes people lose faith in the regulatory system of the United States, which I'm proud of. And I think could and should be a leader in the world for providing clarity, toughness. We're not asking for, easy rules. We're just asking for clear rules.
So Gary did go on CNBC afterward. One of the things that he said was, look at the leading lights in this field, in the crypto field just 2 years ago. A number of them are in jail right now. And I'm not just talking about SBF. There's been tens of billions of dollars of losses and bankruptcies and so forth. What innovative field in America survives without building trust in that field and protecting investors or consumers? How would you respond to that?
Well, you certainly should go after bad actors, right? I mean, we went after Bernie Madoff, but we're not talking about going after the bad actors. We're talking about going after the folks that went through, like a Coinbase, went through the process, went through the SEC to get their IPO approved. And Coinbase's business today is essentially the same as it was when they applied to basically do a public offering and get SEC approval for their prospectus. And so did you not know back then, Gary, that this stuff was a security? Did you know and you just didn't tell us? I mean, what's going on? So sure, we definitely want to put the kibosh on bad actors. But if you look at the list of folks that Gary's going after, they're the folks that have tried going through the front door. He's not going after the back door guys. He's going after people that are going through the front door. And that just basically is a warning to everyone about the whole industry. And so he's not providing any recognition that this $2 trillion industry and some of the offerings that are being used by companies like PayPal and Visa and MasterCard are legitimate, are cost effective, and are shaking up and increasing competition in America and America's ability to compete with others. And so you can't use the excuse that they're bad actors. There's bad actors in every industry to basically create a chill and restrict the good actors as well. And so there's indiscriminate punishment of this industry. And it really is, for me, having been a regulator myself, it's an embarrassment.
Yeah, I think Robinhood's come out and said now that, because the SEC is like, oh, come in, we can figure things out. And Robinhood went in and basically were given no path forward. So sort of a bait and switch on the SEC's part.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make everything a security, help us figure out how to register it. Nobody has been able to figure that out. This isn't a question of, well, there's this bad actor that didn't do it right. Nobody can get through the door. I call it the Khashoggi effect. Like when Khashoggi was told to come to the Turkish embassy to pick up his marriage license, he met bone saws and never walked out the door. And that's the feeling. I don't know anyone who's walked into the SEC in this industry and come out with a workable path. And so you're basically just going into, it's like a Dostoevsky novel where you go in and you basically confess your crimes and then things go from bad to worse.
Well, let's talk about Silvergate, right? Because we have this new investigation now from Nick Carter. And, Silvergate used to be this sort of run-of-the-mill regional bank, pretty straightforward business model. They hard pivot into crypto very successfully, right? They've got all the biggest crypto firms as clients. And part of the reason is they've got this instant settlement product that's great because it runs 24/7. The blockchain doesn't take nights and weekends. And so they have the successful IPO. They're the darling of the industry. But then, we have a lot of these crypto dominoes fall. The industry suffers. And sort of FTX was this final nail in the coffin. and we see Silvergate fall as well. From a far surface level, it all seemed pretty reasonable, right? They had all their eggs in the crypto basket, and so when crypto fell, so did Silvergate. But what we're learning is that maybe things were a bit more insidious. So what really happened there?
Well, look, Silvergate definitely backed some bad actors. And when I say back, they opened bank accounts for FTX and Binance. And under the current system, FTX and Binance are regulated as money transmitters. And so the bank, in this case, Silvergate, doesn't actually get to see the underlying customers of FTX and Binance. And this is a problem across all of fintech. And I think a move toward open banking can solve that. But in the case of Silvergate, they had 82% of their assets in the crypto business. And, those are just bank deposits. Those themselves aren't high risk. What the challenge is you take that money and you put it to work, and then the regulator comes along, in this case, like the FDIC and other regulators, the Fed, and they say, hey, we want those deposits to be under 15% of your business. They snap their fingers, and look, any bank or financial institution that has a deposit base, if they have to get rid of the bulk of their deposits overnight, those deposits are matched against investments on the other side. That's going to destroy their balance sheet, their liquidity position. Silvergate was basically told that. It wasn't, I don't believe, put in writing, but it was a wink, wink, nod, nod, do this or else. And the or else is backed up by the fact that some of your investments and your liquidity on your balance sheet is backed by the home loan banking system, of which they participated. And if you put a pressure campaign on the home loan banking system to cut off that liquidity, that's another gun to the head. And so a combination of those things, plus sort of a whispering campaign that these guys are in bed with FTX rather than a victim of FTX, and you get a run on the bank. And that's just a good old fashioned way to take down the bank. None of the depositors lost money, but all the investors got wiped out. And really that's the point to other banks, is if you displease us, we will do something that will cause a run on your bank. It'll send your stock price to zero. That's a pretty clear indication for banks to de-risk, to get out of an industry that is disfavored by a set of regulators. And so, Silvergate could have survived, but it was helped to its demise in a very, very rapid fashion by some statements by politicians that basically sent the message that you can't trust to have your money in this bank. And no bank can survive a bank run without the support of the Fed discount window. And in this case, the Fed discount window was closed. The bank had to actually liquidate. And its most valuable asset, the SEN network that had moved over $2 trillion. Normally, when you have a bankruptcy or a liquidation, it's up to the liquidator to try to maximize the value of the assets. They didn't sell SEN. They didn't transfer it to another financial institution. They just wrote a check for all the balances on it, sent it home, and basically burned that network to the ground. And that again was a very deliberate message to tell you that if you innovate in this area, you will be punished, and what you created will be destroyed, and the investors will lose everything. And so that message, which was delivered so successfully, also happened to bring down other banks like Signature, and ultimately banks that weren't even that crypto focused, but were still in the vicinity, like Silicon Valley Bank. And ultimately my bank, First Republic, was brought down as well. And at that point, the regulators recognized they might have actually started an overall bank run against all community banks, or any bank that had taken a bunch of deposits and invested that on the other side of their balance sheet for the long term. Everybody got nervous. And so the Fed had to actually step in and stop any other banks from failing by saying, hey, the Fed discount window is open. If you have any problematic assets, we'll take them as a collateral and give you 100% liquidity. Just the opposite of how Silvergate was treated. And so that type of, differential treatment is a way of signaling, who are the favorite child, and who's going to go to the abattoir for for termination.
Right. And I mean, I think that the other point is that this continues to be the status quo, right? I think, there's been banks that have looked to fill Silvergate's void, Customers Bank, I think. And they also had a real-time settlement product as well called CBIT. They were issued an enforcement action by the Fed in August. You've got Custodia Bank. They've had their ongoing fight with the Fed as well. I think this year, and a lot of this has come out of FTX's fall as well. There was so much toxicity around the industry, but it does feel like this year that the winds have started to shift a little bit. You've seen, I think, especially the Republicans sort of leaning into a more pro-crypto stance. Do you feel the environment shifting around Operation Choke Point 2.0, or especially, you're on the banking side, you're on the politics side, right?
Well, the environment is shifting both with the SEC and the bank regulators, because some of these situations have now matured to the point where people in court have gotten discovery and found out what happened behind the scenes. And it's clear that the regulators are operating beyond their authority and in a way the courts use the words arbitrary and capricious. And this is whether you're trying to create a fund so people can buy, Bitcoin and an ETF or an ETP from BlackRock or Fidelity, or whether a coin like XRP is a security, or in the case of these banks, is there a set of shadow regulations where you really are under a cease and desist order, under continual audit pressure, unless you basically deplatform particular industries. We're talking about crypto. It's not the only industry that's been under pressure from Operation Choke Point, but it's the one in this case that we're talking about that we're closest to. And you're absolutely right that it's not just these banks. There's a whole bunch of other banks, the last remaining banks standing, and they're having a very, very hard time servicing the industry.
Well, you've recently gone public with a few core principles that define your approach and the approach of your ecosystem. I think one of those principles serves as a pretty natural solution to the politicization of the banking system. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah. So there's three principles that we're pushing, and they all would have helped in the situations with FTX and Binance and they're open banking. Open banking means that instead of having your money sitting in a pooled account for like an FTX or a Binance or Coinbase or Square or even PayPal, the balances would actually be directly at the bank. They'd be on a bank ledger. It could be a blockchain ledger. It could be a traditional ledger, but the bank would be able to see those balances, do the KYC, know whether the money was there, because in the case of FTX, the money wasn't there, know that the folks are properly KYC'd. In the case of Binance, they didn't do proper KYC. So in that situation, the direct customer relationship is with the bank, and APIs are provided to the fintechs so they can still move the money on behalf of the customers, but they don't have to have it sitting in a pooled account, hidden away from the compliance and the fraud controls and risk controls that the banks have. So let's use bank grade controls, but have APIs that let third parties access those funds with consent of the consumer. Combine that principle with fair access, which means, look, if it's legal and it's licensed, it should be banked. There shouldn't be a shadow shaming list of what industries can't get access to banking services. Look, if it's related to sex, but it's legal, or it's related to drugs, or it's related to gambling, or related to firearms or fracking or abortion clinics or whatever the topic is, some politician or regulator operating under the direction of a politician shouldn't be weaponizing the financial system to basically deny access to legal and licensed businesses. From a discrimination point of view, we don't discriminate against race. We don't discriminate against religion. We don't discriminate against gender. I don't really understand why we would discriminate against nation of origin. Just because a person's like nation of origin is like X versus Y, I don't believe why there should be discrimination against them any more than against race, religion, or gender, right? You might have different risk controls, that's fine. But to actually exclude someone, and it's the same thing for industries. If it's legal and it's licensed, I think it should be banked, and it should be banked with open banking. And look, I'm not blind to the fact that there's going to be risk, fraud risk, compliance risk, money laundering risk, terrorist financing risk. That's what controls are for. That has to be managed. If you simply think you're going to avoid the problem, you're not going to avoid the problem. It's going to creep in through the back door, and it's going to be in your system. So pretending like you've avoided a risk, rather than like stepping up and saying, we've got to manage risk, that's ridiculous. That's just basically compliance theater. We want to do real compliance. And look, it's not going to be perfect. Everybody knows that. But you've got to show you're using best practices. So if you take open banking, fair access, and risk management rather than risk theater, then you're going to have an effective banking system. You're going to have a system that in the United States could be the leader in the world. We have the best currency, and we have all this innovation in alternative currencies, alternative technologies, and that's the foundation for moving forward.
And finally, for those who aren't aware, you are running for Congress in Nevada's 2nd District. Do you want to wrap us up with a quick campaign update?
Well, on the campaign side, I'm running as a nonpartisan, and that's really part of the principle of trying to depolarize these issues. I'd like to work with both Republicans and Democrats on a whole range of issues. Now, obviously, we've got a particular focus on all these financial innovation issues because that's the sector that I come from. But as a general principle, we don't believe that you should unnecessarily weaponize any issues that are in politics. I mean, we have the culture wars and stuff, but there was a time when liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats overlapped and there was a middle. And so I'm committed to that middle because that middle is where things get done. And so that's what this campaign is about. It'll be ongoing. I've been already involved in congressional issues long ago since I worked at the Fed starting 20 years ago. But now I'm just more, in the public eye and have found that helps with access and have been more easily able to talk to Democrats and Republicans about these issues. And we've seen them voting together to get sensible regulation out the door. And I will be continuing to do that. Really excited to have this opportunity. Very lucky that we got the bank this year. So we're in the tent rather than on the outside looking in, and being in the political process right now. The best way to basically get the attention of regulators is to be, the politicians that are overseeing them. So just like those sessions where Gary Gensler had to come and answer for his actions, well, I think that's a healthy process. That's something that's still working in our democracy, and I want to double down and see that continue to work and basically put the U.S. back where it should be, the leader in financial innovation, the most trusted source. And that's by us tackling these issues, not avoiding them, and not running a Tony Soprano kind of operation at our national, federal banking and securities regulatory levels.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Greg.
All righty, Alec. Thank you.